people didn't know they had a problem until they talked to me.
Mm.
This never gets resolved. I've never encountered a person who said, oh, I was suffering for status and now I have it. Now I'm relieved and now I'm a happy person. So my advice to the donors, walk the fucking talk.
Welcome to our new My Journey to Impact session today with Stefan Shaw. Stefan and I have met many times in the virtual space and never in the physical space so far, which is very strange to be honest, because we've been speaking for years. So I've reached out to Stefan because he is, for me, a deep representation of a journey to impact, going through many stations in his life and being deeply dedicated to impact now. So I think what you have to share, Stefan, is very valuable for people who want to understand how that happens and how they can learn from you. So as always, what we want to do is we want to explore more or less two questions. One is, who are you actually? So we can contextualize the story you're telling, but also.
Wish I knew.
Sorry?
I wish I knew.
So who are you right now? What do you know about yourself right now? So that's to be more clear. Yes, very, very, very fair. And the second question then is, what happened? How did it? What was that journey that led to that moment in time where you decided to dedicate your life towards positive impact? And then we just take it to wherever we take it. And I'm really looking forward to having that conversation. Right. So over to you. You can dive right in.
Okay, I believe I'll just introduce myself, who I am right in this moment and what I'm doing. So I work with actually two companies, and that is Legacies Now and Effektiv Spenden. Effektiv Spenden is a platform that I co-founded 2.5 years ago that is directed at people who want to donate, not only for a good cause, but for a good cause with a significant impact. We try to outline how you could look at impact, what that means in terms of relevant field, what it means in terms of relevant interventions, and what kind of organizations we recommend that do the job extremely well. And Legacies Now is sort of addressing the same public, except for one difference. We are a consultancy with Legacies Now and try to help people that want to give away in the range of $1 million or more per year to find the targets, but not only that, but also to help them find the common cause within a family. And often we have multi-generational context in family. We try to moderate or facilitate how this family gathers behind the common cause. So basically, it's all centered around helping people who are really serious about impact to find the right field, to find the right intervention, identify the organization they really like, and help them move the money to that organization. So I'm 53, I believe. Yes, I have to do the math. I'm 53. I'm married and happily so, and have two children that are already out of school, so they're doing their college education and are left the house, which basically started a new chapter in my life, in our relationship. And we're trying to figure out at the moment what this is, how we want to live this life as back to a couple. And we had the privilege to be living together for a number of years before the children came on board. So we know that this can be done. And I'm really curious to find out what is this. Are we falling back to student times and habits, or is it some sort of pre-retirement scenario we're moving into? I don't know. we're just trying out a couple of things to find out.
So what were student times and habits for you?
So I studied in Germany, in Marburg, and my habit actually at that time was, I believe, to look at a lot of subjects and avoid really deep dives. So I was in shallow waters, but I covered a lot of ground. Because I studied literature and philosophy, psychology, politics, a little media science. So I really wanted to understand how all this, fits together, and was preparing for a job I didn't know existed. So I just tried to get some kind of humanistic all-round education with no really specific goal, and but it was still quite optimistic at that time that something interesting will turn up. And
when you say how all this fits together, what do you have in mind when you say all this?
Well, I was trying to make sense of the world, basically, and also of my place in it. So I remember that I was at that time in a real playful mood. I didn't know at all where I fitted in, both content-wise and also capability-wise. So I didn't know, am I like part of the smart group? Am I part of the dumb group? Am I right in the middle? I didn't know. So I had to try out really a lot of stuff to find out where I'm good at and where I'm really actually failing, and put this puzzle together of, this is what the world can offer me, and this is what I want to take. And at that time, it was for a number of years, it was rather play than really serious business, just trying out stuff, checking out how far, bullshit will get me, and when really serious content is required and stuff like that.
I find that quite an achievement to save your playfulness and probably also your general curiosity all the way up to your studies, because usually people lose that during school.
Yeah, school can do this to you. That's
exactly
true.
So how did you protect your playfulness and curiosity during that time? Who helped you?
I think this goes back to childhood, actually. I felt when I was growing up, I felt that I had great protection at home. I felt that I could risk stuff and come back and be accepted and integrated again into the family. So I grew up with a very optimistic attitude that there is something in store for me in life, and it was really excited to get there. And I think it was this feeling of I can risk stuff, I can fail, and there are people who will back me up or help me, and probably sort of generalize this feeling, from my parents to my context in general. And this allowed me to take risks, or to be in a playful mood. Yeah, I mean, when you study stuff, you don't take risks actually, but to just try stuff out.
Okay, so safe environment, and how did that? I know that sometimes you can have the safe environment at home, but at school it is difficult, and that can shatter your creativity and your curiosity. What effect did school have on you in that?
Yeah, that's well, I had an interesting experience, and I think this really confirms my observation, because I grew up in a small town, and I had to leave at one point to get away from all this, smallness, and decided to go abroad, to go to the United States for an exchange student year in high school. And I didn't know at that time whether this would work out, whether I would, I applied at 2 or 3 programs. I didn't know whether they would take me. So my alternative scenario was to go to boarding school, just to, get out of this, just like small freakish town. And when I came back, actually the year I was in the United States was the year that my peer group started drinking. And when I came back, they were really advanced at this game. And I was not in training. I just saw the results, and they pretty much disgusted me. And so I just couldn't go along. Was not a conscious decision, but it was just I didn't want to end up like them in the morning. I just I didn't see the point of getting really drunk and being hungover. And this sort of catapulted me out of this group, of my peer group. But I didn't feel that this was really a problem because I felt so protected actually at home. And I also tried to connect to people who were beyond this, who had experienced all this, being drunk, taking drugs, and just being wasted. So I looked up like a year or two ahead of me, people who were just graduating. And since I had this experience of being in the United States, although I was younger than them, they found it interesting to be in contact with me. And I was super happy and privileged to connect it to them. And so I could leave my old peer group. But I remember that I felt sort of a loner, maybe weirdo at times in this phase. But I had this great home. I had this great experience of the States where I had this experience. I managed. I had friends there, and it was just wonderful. So I just held on, and eventually things changed.
So it's a mixture between being protected and being able to experiment and change perspectives. That's what helped you protect your curiosity and playfulness.
And I think it continued into my college studies, college education, because again, partying was really, big, of course. And I never learned how to party. Until this day, I don't know how to get wasted. And I feel like when I start drinking, after 2 or 3 beers, I'm just checking out because I just don't like the feeling of losing control. I just never learned it. So, and you can believe that made me a stranger in this this environment. But I was lucky because I had a number of friends who just recognized me for who I was and said, well, he's weird in this way, but other than that, he's really a cool dude. So what I missed out were just the heavy party, but not the friends.
That's good, but probably that adds a different quality, right? Because it's very easy to connect when you're in some altered state and lowered barriers, but it's definitely more valuable to connect when you're on a higher level of thinking and functioning.
Yeah, but it was not a conscious decision. I don't want to put a value to it actually, because it was just I just missed out on this. I didn't have the training, I didn't have the experience, and I just couldn't go along. Yeah.
But when you first talked about your time at university and the playfulness that you addressed this with, it sounded like you've lost that playfulness a little bit later. Is that did I hear that right, or did you preserve?
Yeah, because I think this playfulness was very self-centered. It was really I want to test out my limits. I want to know my place in the world. It was not about relevance at all. It was just about testing out limits and see how far I can get. And I was quite amazed because with this playfulness comes courage, because you can take risks if you're playing. If it's serious, you cannot, or you don't want to. And I was totally amazed to see how far bullshit can get you in life. Just claiming that stuff would get you really far. And then eventually came a point where I felt, no, I have to deliver on my promises now. So I might not promise like the world, try to promise what I can really fulfill, but still it was about me. my path. It was not so much about relevance in terms of giving something to the world needs.
Yeah, because it can be a dangerous path going down the bullshitting path, right?
Oh yes,
people
can be very
been,
successful.
Exactly, and people have been stuck there. So
and eventually end up as CEOs, which is a drama.
Or presidents, or okay, but we're getting already in the middle of the second part of the question, because what did you do? What did you start to do when you became more serious in your play, and did that already have something to do with impact, or when did it start shifting?
In a way. So I got my education after university at the Boston Consulting Group. I was with them for a couple of years, and this was still part of finding out, am I capable enough to survive in an environment like this? And I just stayed with them for 2.5 years, because after that, or during my time at BCG, which I really loved, I met a guy in Munich who was running a gallery for contemporary art. And it was an art gallery that I really admired. And from my childhood days, because my family was really engaged in, was friends with artists and knew a couple of art dealers. So this was basically the environment I grew up in. And I convinced this guy, you need a partner to address the young generation, because he was, I think, 20 years older than I was. And I joined his gallery because I was totally convinced, this is my dream job. This is what I have been wanting all along. And but it was still play, of course, because it was luxury good. The gallery was based in Munich, and then I had to learn something the hard way. And this was the time when my parents started collecting contemporary art in, late 70s, early 80s, was a time where this was really avant-garde. Like the people who were dealing with single strokes, on a white canvas, they really were interesting folks, because they were definitely not the mainstream. And this has changed, or had changed in the coming decades. And I had to find out that I was selling art to people who weren't at all interested in art. They were just interested in signaling something to their environment. They wanted to signal distinction, taste, money, worth. So I felt that this kind of selling art to Munich bourgeoisie was not relevant at all, didn't have any impact. And again, it was not impact in terms of giving something to the world. It was just totally irrelevant. It was just luxury. So really stupid stuff. And I tried to reconcile this with where I came from by founding small consultancy, Art Matters, where I tried to employ or translate or broker the innovation and the creativity of artists who are loved. The artists hadn't changed, the public had changed, the consumers had changed, and broker their creativity to companies who I felt, also from my experience with BCG, weren't innovative at all, especially when it came to being innovative communicators of innovative products. So I tried to bring them together, and I did workshops where the artists were discussing with really senior management about innovation processes, quite detailed stuff. But again, after I had been doing this for a number of years, I felt that I was not really working on pressing issues. Rather, I was solving problems that I had to invent before I solved them. So I had to convince the companies, listen, you have an innovation deficit and problem. and I can solve this. I have the artist, and sort of filled slots in corporate development programs rather than really contribute to solutions. I mean, it was fascinating, it was exotic, it was fun, but it was rather team building than achieving.
So again, it wasn't relevant, right? So you
it was not relevant
from one position to the next position where you felt it wasn't relevant. So how do you signify relevance? How do you know that something is relevant or not?
I'd say easing a pain. If there is really a pain, if someone or something, and it can be also an organization, is suffering and is just beyond their potential, and even could be scary to people involved, to release energy, positive energy, and to work on reducing or eliminating the suffering. This is relevance for me. So working on actual problems, and this could be, it could be a team problem. We're not getting along. Everybody has is sleeping really bad, and we're not getting things done. This could be an actual problem, and this changed my trajectory. From Art Matters, I created Change Matters, which was a consultancy to address actually business problems, because I was just longing for people to come up to me and tell me, listen, we really have an issue here. We really have a problem. Help us solve this. And this was really a different situation from the situation I had created before, where people didn't know they had a problem until they talked to me.
But I'd like to go a little bit deeper on the relevance question, because if you link it to suffering, I believe that many people suffer really badly if they have the feeling that they are lacking status, right? But that is not the kind of suffering you're talking about. So where do you draw the line between suffering that is a type of suffering that you want to solve or help solve, and which ones do you think are things you don't want to address?
Okay, that's a cool question. I think that you're right. There is a hunger for status, and you could describe it as suffering. But this is, the suffering for status is a suffering that will never end. This never gets resolved. I've never encountered a person who said, "Oh, I was suffering for status, and now I have it. Now I'm relieved, and now I'm a happy person." Because the status thing always goes on and on and on. You always compare yourself to the next level, and you want to get there, and you put all your energy behind it. And it's like consumerism. It's like when you buy stuff, you really think this is going to change your life. You buy it, and in this very instant, you understand it's not going to change anything. And what happens? You don't learn. You just go out and buy the next stupid stuff to get out of this trap. And I think the same is true for hunger for status or suffering, because you don't have the status you believe you should be having. So I'm talking about suffering that is resolved and ends and makes way for a better path or better energy or happier life.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Yes. Okay. Although the endless suffering type, especially in the status seeking domain, obviously is a really interesting market.
Yes.
But you actively decided against that market. So I would see that as a first step towards impact.
Yes, maybe not. Of course, I exited a promising career, with BCG. So you could say, "Oh, great! He decided against status and for another path." But you have to see, of course, that with what I did, this, how can I put it? I think a lot of people could project dreams and aspirations on my path. So I had super positive feedback on my step when I was at BCG. So people didn't see it at all as letting go of status. So they say, well, you're doing your thing. You have found the stuff you really love, and the way you do it is great. So it was not a sacrifice at all to move this way.
No, but I actually meant a different. So, following the Art Matters path, where you would solve the status needs of wealthy individuals, and then solve them again and again and again, can be a very, very financially successful.
Yeah, can be lucrative. Yes, if you play the game right. Yes,
exactly. So but you abandoned that because you didn't see that as something that is actually of value, because it doesn't never finds a resolution. So you abandoned that easier path on the financial profit side for a different path that probably wasn't as easy but more fulfilling, I guess.
Yes and no. So the contemporary art world isn't really easy financially. It's really challenging.
Okay.
And it's super heavily sales driven. You have to stay on the pedal like 24/7. And I think what I found problematic was that at times I couldn't answer the question, why am I nice to this person? Is this because I like this person, or because I see a potential buyer? And when this, and I also had the situation where friends started to buy art, and this like totally messed up my perception of why am I, behaving the way I am? It was not. I don't think I ever really was inauthentic, but it was not authentic really at that time. I didn't have the confidence that I was really an authentic person in the situation. And this was one force that drove me away. And the other was certainly to really solve real problems. And that got me back to consulting, to really ease pain. And it could be financial pain also. It doesn't have to be like mental pain, but it could be someone was really having a hard time with something and I could help.
Okay, so authenticity plays a role here too, right? So you want to as a marker of okay, it feels like I'm doing the right thing because I can be in the flow of how I am myself as an expression, and if I can do that, then I feel authentic, and then it seems like I'm doing the right thing. So the relevance of what is the right thing to do is linked with authenticity in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's that's certainly true for me. Yeah.
Okay. But then, okay, being in probably corporate environments, helping with innovation, in my experience, there's not a lot of deep authenticity in corporate environments. How do you consolidate that?
Yeah. Well, I was leaving. When I set up Change Matters, I was leaving this innovation space and this space of spending like weekends with high impact teams and artists of different sorts, because I felt this was rather entertainment than really problem solving. I didn't have the impression that anything changed in the company from what I heard and from what I saw. So Change Matters basically was focusing on change management, so actually getting things done, and also I didn't want to have a continuation of such a sales heavy process like this art world was, or selling also these workshops. I just wanted to have like longer lasting relationships, longer processes, and really understanding how things work, and also being part of experiencing the solution. So longer relationships, longer projects, stuff like that. And this eventually, so it started out with change management, and it did so because I did this together with another former colleague of BCG who was quite experienced in change management. I didn't have any substantial experience. I had to learn, on the job. But eventually, it migrated towards strategy again, where I came from with BCG, which I liked a lot too. But also liked a lot because it accidentally brought me together with the nonprofit world, because I had to conduct a strategy project or organization assessment project that pushed me into an entirely new field.
Okay, what was that?
So it was, I believe it was about 10 years ago, when I was asked together with a colleague by a family who ran a large mentoring program in Germany. Big Brothers, Big Sisters originated in the US, but they had introduced it to Germany. It was a program that brought basically academics together with children in precarious households that had social problems, that had educational problems and money problems, so poor households. And the evidence shows that even 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week of exclusive time, someone else who is not part of your original environment, can help a child tremendously to increase self-esteem, to increase even grades, to have a higher chance of getting to a better school eventually. You can measure this effect of just 1 year of mentoring 5, 6, 7, 8 years later against a control group. So it's really a great intervention, and it's really easy to understand. It's easy to implement. So the family had funded this organization with 2.5 or 3 million a year. So it was substantial. They were the exclusive donors to this organization. But there was a change in management within the organization. And for them, it was a good window of opportunity to have someone external look at the organization. Is that okay, what they're doing? And what can be improved. And I was totally new to the sector, and if you're new to something, you have to benchmark to understand what you're looking at. So I tried to identify other organizations who were active in the same field, and I encountered another organization who were doing the exact same program, basically, but they had better evaluations because they had a scientific background. They were founded in university. And also they were moving about like the same volume. So both organizations were enabling 1,000 tandems, that's how we call them, 1,000 pairs of children and mentors to work together. Then I compared the cost of doing the exact same thing. And it turned out that the other organization, B, as opposed to the first I looked at, was moving the same stuff for 1/10 of the cost, so 10% of the cost. And this, I mean, I've never seen like factor 10 in business before. It just blew me away. And so eventually, of course, I had to tell the family, you have to close this thing down. There's just no sense in continuing this kind of ridiculous expenditure. And I suggested just move 10% of your funding to the other organization. You will reach as many children as before, and you have 90% freed up for other, super interesting stuff. And then they came back to us, to my colleague and me, and asked me, what is interesting, super exciting, and super sexy stuff? How can we prevent that we, walk into the same trap again? And this was basically the founding case for the Benckiser Foundation that I eventually led and set up with the explicit goal of finding, high impact opportunities. And as it turns out, and this was, quite a surprise, that this factor 10 was not an outlier at all. It was rather conservative when I looked at other interventions and I compared interventions in Germany to interventions worldwide. Actually, the factor in difference of 100 was more regular finding. And this was devastating at first because I couldn't believe that something like this like is allowed to go on.
Mhm.
And of course, it was funded with my money and your money, taxpayers' money, because it was tax deductible, all this stuff. But it also has a flip side. You can be devastated, or you can see, wow, there's just wonderful leverage. I mean, beautiful leverage. If nobody knows about this, now I can educate people that there are those differences and move them to give their money to those high impact opportunities. I can just, tenfold or hundredfold their impact by just, talking to them. And this was the sort, this discovery was really enlightening, and it combined my wish to be relevant or significant or have an impact, but rather looking at myself and me and how can I achieve something. Combine this with something that lots parts of the world really needed, that was relevant to them as well, and to combine like what's relevant to them, to my leverage, and what's relevant to me was just really beautiful.
Yeah, I can see it's just hearing you describe it is absolutely beautiful. Yeah. And so all of that fit together suddenly, and serendipity brought you into that moment, and that was your impact moment, right? So you somehow flipped into, okay, I'm going to use this because this feels right, and there is an enormous leverage.
And actually, when you just mentioned authenticity earlier, it reminded me of a conversation I had with an old friend of mine when I joined the foundation and worked within the foundation. There was this moment where I had tried to describe what I was doing, and he knew all my other steps in life, and I had always like pitched what I was doing as like super relevant, super great, and this is the future. And he really responded when I talked about the foundation. Now, this is really you. Now you're not trying to sell anything. It's just you. It's just what needs to be done, and it's so authentic. And he used this very word. It's great to see that you have finally arrived at something that is really corresponding to you as a person.
Before we go on into what happened next, because in the beginning you described what you're doing right now, which is not at Bankiza anymore, but there obviously was a continuation of things. I'd like to dive a little bit into the why of the leverage. So what's your thinking around that question of why can some organizations or people do something at 1% of the cost that others have to spend a lot more on? Do you see some pattern there that is relevant?
Yeah. So I think if we stay within like the German ecosystem, because if you broaden your vision to the worldwide ecosystem, it becomes a different story. But first, stick to Germany. I think what is really important to understand is that the people who are recipients of some service, like mentoring, are not the one who pay for it. Because if they were, there would be some kind of contest or elimination sorts of between
there's no market
services. If of course, I mean, if a child had to pay it, I mean, you could even tell the child, it's super valuable what we're doing to you. This, and just give €1 for an hour with this. I mean, you can spare this. It's just €1. Or maybe 10 cents, or let's say €1. And if you had to tell the child, okay, this other organization, they're doing basically the same stuff, but it's €10. I mean, what would the child choose? They would choose the €1 because it's the same service level and the same product, and it just delivers exactly the same. But the child is not asked to pay for the service. The donor is asked to pay for the service. And for donors, often just doing something good is enough of relevance. Being in the right space, doing some good equals doing good, and they don't distinguish between doing more good or less good. And it's a relationship business often, where you have met someone and he's trustworthy and you like him or her, and she tells you about a program she's associated with, and then you say, well, I know this person, I trust her, and often enough, I mean, even within Big Brothers, Big Sisters, all of the employees were well-meaning. I mean, they were really trying to achieve the best. It was not that they're trying to embezzle money or something, not at all. But they didn't know better, and they were not punished for it, for not knowing better by the market, because it's not a market that punishes stuff like that. It's a market that works differently. And Big Brothers Big Sisters was excellent in communication and marketing. They were just really getting to the donors, getting to the donors, to also the family I consulted, and they loved the stories they generated. They didn't look at the numbers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's basically a market failure, because
there's no market.
There's a misalignment of interests that isn't corrected for by the market. Would you say something similar is going on in the general economic markets, if there is massive accumulation of wealth? So if there's a bus load full of white old men that can exert as much signaling power onto the markets as half of humanity, one could say something similar is going on. Would you say? Do you agree with that?
Yes, of course. I mean, of course, we have a systemic problem, which I think is important to note is not the problem of the individual. It's not the problem of Bill Gates. It's not the problem of Jim Bezos. It's a problem of a system that allows people to become like super wealthy and accumulate this kind of money and power, also to change things for the better, but even make their own calls on what is better and how to change. Yes, absolutely. I believe that is a great problem, and I get asked that a lot. Don't you think that you're working within a system that in itself has its systemic issues? And I say, yes, of course I do. But within the system, this is the right call for me to move money within the system, and I hope there are other people who are working on the system. It's not me. I'm not working on the system. I'm working within the system. Others need to work on the system to make a change.
Yeah, because that's where your resonance lies, right? That's where your skill set and interests collide, so to say. Yeah. Okay, but that's the perfect segue into what you're doing right now, right? Because you at one point decided that what you were doing at Benkiso was complete. There was something else that was calling you.
Well, actually, the family decided that it was complete rather than I did.
Well, sometimes that's helpful too. Others.
Oh well, yeah. The family changed course, so the funders changed course with the foundation, and I was not the right match to go this new path for them, and it was like a mutual understanding, but still. I don't want to sound it like I made this heroic decision and left them. We had to dissolve this thing after like 7 great years that were still great, although we had to end it at some point. Yes, and I liked it so much actually that I decided to continue doing this, except with like 2 extensions or 2 differences. One was that right now I'm consulting more families than before. At that time, it was just 1 family within the foundation. And also I extended my areas of interest. So it was, at that time, it was primarily extreme poverty and education in the developing world. That was our focus, increasingly became our focus. And now it's extreme poverty, it's animal welfare, it's democracy, it's climate crisis. So a number of issues that are on the minds of my clients and are also really relevant in my perspective. So where what they want to achieve and what I want to get achieved intersects, and in this intersection, we just work together.
So relevance comes up again here. And this is a huge question, of course, right? We're presented with 17 SDGs and then sub-targets, or we want to stay within the planetary boundaries and have donut economies, or but what is relevant to start with? If you have limited resources and you cannot address everything at once, where do you start? And I remember you once showed me those beautiful results of that process of finding relevance for your organization. So how do you establish what's relevant for you?
So of course it's a relative call. It's not an absolute call. You know, what is relevant, and it always needs to be re-examined every year, every month or so. But we look at first we look at what are really big problems. I mean, big problems. I'd say that, for example, I mean, in the sector, or in the tax deductible sector, there are a lot of things you can do, like preserve churches from going into ruins, for example. And I think it's totally worth, employing time and resources. But is it really a big problem compared to other problems? I don't know. Is extending a zoo, is that a big problem or compared to others? So I try to identify, is a problem really big enough that it's worth our attention? Then we are thinking about, is it solvable? I mean, can we do something about it? I mean, we have a lot of great problems where it's really hard to find a good solution, or we sometimes say solvable or tractable. I mean, if we do something to help solve this problem, will we know that we have actually achieved something? Can we somehow assess it or measure it? Is there some sort of causal correlation between what we do with our money and what happens? And another, like a third really interesting criteria is neglectedness, which would be, is there already a lot of money flowing into this issue, or is it not? And if you have a neglected issue that is big and solvable, chances are high that if you put money into it, your incremental impact is super high, because you are one of the first people, to address this. You can harvest the low-hanging fruit. There are a number of reasons why this is a smart way to look at things.
That's blue ocean, or competition is for losers, kind of.
So we try to apply this framework to a number of courses. I mean, a myriad of courses, and we came up with, we believe that the issue of extreme poverty, animal welfare, climate crisis, and to some extent democracy, to some extent, because it's a really big and important issue, but it's really hard to find tractable solutions. And really measure impact. It's really tough. It hasn't been really researched very well. So this is what we basically ended up with, and also so-called existential risks. So looking further into the future, what are risks that are threatening humanity as a whole in terms of threatening us with extinction or with like endless suffering. That could be addressed or should be addressed today. And they're rather abstract. They seem abstract. It's like AI, for example. If AI really becomes smarter as a whole, like we do, we better have implemented some good ethic boundaries and moral boundaries before we let this thing loose. And it's really super surprising how little research is being conducted on this very topic compared to what's at stake. So this could be an interesting area also to employ philanthropic capital, but this is something that is certainly not mainstream, but checks all the boxes. Potential size of the problem, huge. Is it tractable? Yes. I mean, if you really if you implement code into AI that prohibits it from turning against the creator, us, this would be super tractable. If you finance a think tank who can develop this kind of a code or framework to develop code for this, and is it neglected? Yes, it is. It's really super neglected.
I agree. AI ethics is for sure a huge topic. I would disagree, but we can have this conversation on a different time about whether it's enough to put some code into it. There needs to be some.
It's no disagreement here. This is just a super small segment of what needs to be done. Yes.
The solution has to be much higher dimensional. But I agree that that's one of the biggies in the existential threats is circus for sure. So you're really addressing those huge ones. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes the other really hard thing about impact even harder for you, which is measurement, right? Measuring the actual impact you have, and doing that in a way that it doesn't consume a too large portion of your attention and resources.
Oh yes, yeah, but we have a lot of help here. So in the different fields, if you look, for example, at extreme poverty, which is the trailblazer for measuring success, you wouldn't think that way if you look at our development aid, but it is actually, because for 30 years there have been really wonderful research conducted on what works and what doesn't. For example, number of people will be aware of Michael Kramer, Esther Duflo, etc. This is a group that got awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics 3 years ago, I believe 2 or 3 years ago, for their research on what works and what doesn't in the field of extreme poverty. So there's a large body of research that guides the way towards really cool and impactful interventions, and a number of organizations that have been set up following the research, not the other way around. It was not like organizations doing something and it sometimes said, hey, let's find out whether we achieve anything at all, have this tested, but the other way around. So there was evidence that something really works, and organizations that were set up to scale this kind of intervention. And here in this field, we have think tanks, one in particular in the Bay Area, that are just spending their entire day with finding out what works and what doesn't, what organization overperforms, and putting numbers to it in terms of what does it cost to enable a child in sub-Saharan Africa an entire new year of school, additional year of school. What does it cost? What does it cost to prevent a child to die from malaria and have like a regular life with normal life expectancy? And you can put tags, really price tags on that, and sometimes it's ranges. It's not like this specific number. It's rather range like $3,000 to $4,000 per child, but they have a really good empirical footing. So rather on the conservative end, and we don't have to do any research on that by ourselves. We are basically brokering this kind of information to our clients. They know where it originates from, so we're super transparent on that. And without them, like this organization GiveWell, who does this research, we just couldn't offer this level and the quality of advice. In other fields, it's different. Animal welfare is pretty well researched, and climate crisis is, of course, very well researched, but not from the philanthropy perspective. So there are not too many researchers who try to really quantify how far, in terms of reduced CO2, your dollar will take you. And here, especially, it's getting hard because we believe that interventions that have impact on policy, international policy regulations, have the highest impact. But of course, you cannot really trace like the intervention of one think tank or the changing of a law back to the intervention of one think tank. You have to do some really rough estimates and plausibility tests to get to really wide range, but this range can signal to you that it's probably a lot more interesting to fund a really good scientifically based think tank than plant a tree. Again, we're at factors of 1,000, maybe 10,000 difference. And it doesn't matter whether it's 1,000, 1,200, 1,500. It's just the dimension, like the order of magnitude that is relevant to make a decision.
So essentially, you're saying, okay, if we have a scientific body that can provide the measurement information, then we can work in that field. And because we're not going to do that ourselves, we need those numbers from somebody who's specialized on this. But if you are in an area of, as you were addressing, climate mitigation or climate CO2 reduction, something like that, then there is no clear source of data for interventions. Then you would go downstream and say, let's fund the body that creates that measurement first, so that we then can have more meaningful interventions.
Yeah, and you have to work with expected values, because if you plant a tree, you can be quite certain this tree will grow and ultimately get filter some CO2 out. And you can calculate this down to the ton or the kilogram even. But if you fund a think tank that hasn't delivered naturally, because you're funding something that is supposed to happen in the future, you have to put a probability to it. And you have to basically assume, okay, this think tank could influence this legislation with a probability of 10%. And so you have a number of probabilities that you have to multiply to get to some kind of expected value. If this expected value is a lot higher, like orders of magnitude, than what the tree or the forest will deliver to you, then chances are you should be funding this think tank, not because you're certain they will deliver. It's rather a VC game you're playing here. You're just betting on 10 horses. You're betting on 10 horses. If one gets through, the orders of magnitudes are so high that it will be worth the bet. And it's even, and this is something really interesting that we have to explain to our clients, that we tell them, and it's not even relevant whether your bet succeeds. It just has to be a bet that has to succeed. And you're part of this group. You're just betting on one horse because you don't have more money to bet on a lot of horses, but others are doing the same. One horse passes the line, we all have one.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. But in a way, you're replacing the function of the market in this, because earlier you said, okay, in philanthropy, there's a misalignment of the market, and therefore it doesn't function. But now you're in philanthropy, and so how do you deal with that dissonance?
In a way, we are brokering information that should be the market function. I mean, impact should be the market function. And if donors, like in their majority, would force the organizations to deliver proof of evidence, as evidence of impact, external proof of evidence, then the market would work. So what we're trying to do, we're delivering this kind of market information to a niche population. I mean, it's just maybe 2% or 3% who really, walk the impact talk. But I think it's still, I mean, if we're doing it correctly and transparently, we're just providing information and giving them the opportunity to make up their minds and decide.
So one interpretation of what you're doing could be that you're pioneering a new way to do market. So the fitness function of the market right now is financial profit optimization. And if the fitness function of the markets were impact maximization, then the markets would behave differently. And what you're doing is you're running a prototype of what that could look like.
Yeah, that's true for Germany or German-speaking countries. It's also true for Switzerland. I believe that we are actually pioneers. If you look at the international, especially the Anglo-Saxon context, we're part of a group who is working on the same issues. So we really believe that like the movement of effective altruism provides a really interesting framework for thinking like these issues through. We don't agree, of course, with everything that they come up with because it's a very diverse movement or has grown to be very diverse. But we consider ourselves part of a group of people who are trying to offer this kind of insights, both in blogs or podcasts or consultancies to clients who are really interested in impact. So yes, but within Germany or German-speaking countries, it's certainly true. We probably are the ones who rely most heavily on data in our consultancy and are quite serious about who we want to work with also.
So in a roundabout way, you're actually working on systemic change as well, because
yeah, sort of, yes. And actually, this is a discussion that has been going on within Effective Spin and Legacies now, that we try to change. We want to change the narrative. Right now, we're like really in a niche population, and it's really funny how often we have to defend ourselves. You know, why are you being so number driven? Why are you being so nerdy? And we have to like defend our approach. But increasingly, we believe that no, we shouldn't be the ones who have to defend our approach. You should be defending your approach because the data is here, and the way of thinking this thing through is here. The models are here. We can even calculate or make estimates on issues that are hard to really like put the finger on. You should be the one. So this would be like turning this thing around, this discussion, and trying to establish our attitude or our approach as mainstream. And if this were to happen, which is a generational aspiration, rather than one that would like be on the decade, it's rather generations than years or decades, then you're right. And this would could initialize a new way of looking at the system.
Well, this mirrors a quote that I've recently seen by the UN Director General Guterres. I never know how to pronounce his name properly, but where he basically said the same thing. If people in the impact world, or he used a different phrase to say that, they sometimes or often get attacked as radical and subversive, but actually the radical and subversive act is to undermine our living conditions of the planet. So we have to turn that narrative around. And
that's interesting. I didn't know that. It's true. It's true.
And simply say, okay, you want me to explain myself? No, actually, it's the other way around. You have to explain why you are killing the living conditions on the planet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's totally right about this.
And it's
totally.
So simple. And I have the sense that there's an actual shift in the sentiments of large portions of the population around this. But maybe that's just in my bubble. What's your feeling around? Is there some shift going on, or is this just some gut feeling?
Is there a shift? You mean in sentiment that things are going wrong and we should be doing something about it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, certainly with the next generation there is. So if we encounter like next gen wealthy people, I can certainly see that they are looking at the world with a lot more seriousness and concern than I believe my generation was looking at it when they were in their 20s. And then it gives me a lot of hope also to interact with this next generation, because they're really, I mean, they're sort of helpless, of course, because I had this one person, early 20s, who was heir to a quite significant fortune, and he asked him, "What are you doing with your life?" And he said, "Well, right now I'm studying something and faking a normal existence, and ultimately it's all about how to get rid of this ridiculous amount of money." And this is something that I believe you will hear a lot more often nowadays than maybe 20 or 30 years ago. So they feel it's not right to have, you know, this kind of accumulated, you know, not even by their own contribution, that kind of wealth. And they're looking for ways to get rid of it, but they also know that just getting rid of it and doing something is just not good enough. So they need to really find out what's
an enormous pressure. So the way
enormous pressure.
The way I usually see and describe this is that 2 generations ago somebody started something that was successful in its domain. Then the next generation scaled it. The next generation turned it into a platform, and now the task of the current generation is to just redistribute it, and in a meaningful way, right? You're carrying 3 generations on your back, and you don't want to screw up with that important mission, right? So the people in that exact problem that I know, they often very afraid of not being able to do the right thing, which I can totally understand. Which I can totally understand. It's a ridiculous.
It's a huge responsibility.
Crazy. I don't want to be in that position, for sure.
No, I just had the same sense. I don't want to switch places with them. It's tough.
Yeah. So okay, so there's hope. That's good.
Yes, I think we can all agree that things, in a big scheme of things, are moving into the right direction. I think we have to agree also that we can't be sure that it's fast enough. I mean, we're getting more conscious of what's happening, what we're doing to our planet. We're getting more conscious of the dignity of animals and what we should be doing about that. I mean, this is a process of civilization and understanding. Is it fast enough? I don't know. To really avert catastrophe, I don't know. But I have, as a species, I think, I mean, we have really limited abilities. I mean, cognitively and emotionally. I mean, we are so back in the Stone Ages, and for that set of really limited capabilities, I think we have come a significant way. We're trying to grasp and understand what we're doing to each other and then to the planet. We're trying to do the right thing within our nationalistic ego shit. But still, is it fast enough? I don't know.
Yeah, it comes down to I like using the work of Gaia Harrington, who used to be until recently the director of sustainability services at KPMG USA. Because she did a study on the limits to growth report 2-3 years ago with empirical data, and she looked at 3 scenarios from the limits to growth report, and found that the business as usual scenario, which is what it says, business as usual, we just continue doing things since 1971, when that 50-year-old computer model predicted what was going to happen. We are on track, very well on track with the business as usual, if you compare that to empirical data. Now, the problem with that is that if that scenario really plays out, we are going to be around 3 billion people at the end of the century. Right? That's losing 4 billion people to unnecessary causes. So
Yeah.
of causes of death. So there are two other scenarios she compared that with. Well, one is the comprehensive technology, which is about optimizing towards technology and innovation and global collaboration. And with that scenario, we level out at 8 billion, right? And we actually managed to pull through. But that's a huge bet, right? Can we do this with technology, and then can we do it in such a way that it doesn't backfire, like you?
Yeah, can we pull it off? Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But there's a third scenario called stabilized world, which is all about just changing the narrative of what we want to optimize towards. So instead of optimizing towards financial profits, we optimize towards health and education in their case, because that's where the variables they could measure. And that scenario actually pans out even better than the comprehensive technology scenario. So in a sense, it's what I would call a soul set shift. So in our mind, we probably have understood, or many of us have understood what's going on. But in our feeling, which leads to our actions, we haven't integrated it yet. And that's what I call the soul set shift. So once we start feeling differently about this, and actually not caring about money, but caring about other people and the world, we will start doing things differently.
I agree.
And we're at the pivotal point, right? We're just at the pivotal point. It's still doable right now, but we have to get into action. Yes,
I agree. Couldn't agree more. And we all have to play our little part in this.
Speaking of that, you probably, based on what you said earlier, you don't have much to advise your 14-year-old self, right? Because everything went pretty well for you. You preserved your curiosity and you didn't get into drinking, so that's good. But is there somebody or a group out there of people that you would really like to give some advice to with regards of this conversation? Any person or group of people, leaders or followers, that's what is that one thing that Stefan wants to put out there that
so the one thing I already say to a specific group, and this is the group of donors, of philanthropists, is walk the fucking talk, which is impact has been such an inflationary term because everybody uses it, and everybody is convinced that looking whether something gets done is already impact focus. If something gets done, I'm focused on impact, and I keep telling them, no. Don't use this word unless you're really willing to let go of pet projects. If I can present to you projects that are way, like orders of magnitude more impactful than the stuff you have been believing in the past years or decades even. So my advice to the donors, walk the fucking talk.
That's the perfect ending for me. Is there anything else you want to say? I think this walk the fucking talk. There's nothing else to say.
No, I think it's a good ending. We should end on this note here.
Thank you so much for your time, Stefan. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure was all mine.